My name is Marin Ellison, and I was 17 when I told my parents I was applying to trade school. Mom blinked, like I'd said I was running away with a circus. Dad folded his newspaper the way that announces a verdict, and said, "So, you're throwing your life away." To them, plumbing wasn't a profession. It was a warning label for people who didn't try and liked getting dirty. My sister, Casey, made sure the echo traveled. At Thanksgiving, while I was elbow deep in the garbage disposal saving the turkey gravy line, she announced from the head of the table that media studies in New York had real career pathways and that TikTok was basically a market economy now. Mom slipped a Starbucks gift card into Casey's textbook like a love letter. I got an envelope too, electric bill, due Friday, with a note. If you're too good for a real degree, you're old enough to pay rent. So I did. I paid rent. I cleaned gutters, fixed the dishwasher when it sputtered, and replaced the water heater when it burst on a blue-lit winter night. I didn't charge them. I kept my head down, studied pipe fittings in the hum of midnight, and learned how to tell the difference between a complaint and a leak. Complaints drip louder. At 19, I had my license. At 20, I was working under a master plumber, making more than most of my high school friends, gifted ones included. But the thing about family is they only see what confirms the story they've already written. Mine didn't look up, not even when I fixed an elderly neighbor's toilet and the man pressed $300 and a bag of lemon cookies into my hands. Mom took the cookies, thanked the neighbor, and asked if I was ever going back to real school. Real school. I could have screamed into a bucket trap and called it resonance. So I planned instead. Evenings, weekends, side gigs. I helped renovate a rental just to learn drywall and flooring. Not to prove anyone wrong. Not yet. I just wanted out. At 23, I put an offer on a sagging little two-bedroom at the edge of town. The porch leaned, the basement smelled like a memory that wouldn't apologize, and a porcelain tub slept half buried in the weeds out back. But it was mine. I didn't tell my family. After years of being ignored or corrected, quiet felt like a lock that finally turned. For 6 months, I had peace. I reran lines, resealed seams, and adopted a dog named Cody. 1 ear up, 1 ear flopped, a skeptic of thunder and men with hats. Peace ends the way a pipe fails. Slow pressure, sudden noise. It started with a call from Mom, which was weird. We hadn't spoken in more than half a year. She'd skipped my birthday out of principle. I almost let it go to voicemail. Curiosity answered for me. "Marin, something's wrong with the house," she snapped. "There's water everywhere. Your father, he tried turning something and now it's spraying." Dad swore in the background. A splash smacked tile like a bad punchline. I stared through the sunlight in my new kitchen. "Why are you calling me?" Silence. Then, sharper. "Because the plumber we called is booked for 2 weeks and you still fix toilets, right?" "You still fix toilets." As if I were a dog they'd left outside and suddenly remembered could roll over. "Yeah," I said evenly. "Professionally." She didn't laugh, panic thinner than dignity. "Please, it's flooding the guest bathroom. The neighbor said it might be what was it, flange?" "You learned the word flange?" We Googled it. I had options. Hang up, let them wade in their own pride, be the bigger person. I chose sarcasm. "Try Casey's boyfriend, business major. Maybe he can negotiate the toilet into repairing itself." Marin Ellison. Full name, gavel down. "There's water in the hallway. I'll be there in an hour." Their door was open when I arrived, towels bleeding across the threshold. The air smelled like mildew and ego. Dad stood barefoot in the hall, holding a wrench upside down, pants soaked to the knees. He looked at me like I was simultaneously the problem and the solution. "Really embracing the open floor plan concept," I said, stepping around a drowned stack of magazines. The bathroom was a mess. Water skating across tile, slipping into the hallway carpet, dripping through a ceiling vent with the slow violence of a metronome. They hovered behind me like tourists who'd wandered onto a live set. "You tried turning the valve clockwise?" I asked. Dad nodded the way people nod when they'd rather not ask directions. I bent, turned it the right way, and the geyser stopped. Silence fell so fast it sounded like a lie. Mom exhaled. Dad muttered something that didn't translate to "thank you." "Cracked flange," I said, tapping the base. "Loose for months. You didn't feel the wobble?" "Toilets wobble all the time," Dad scoffed. I smiled. "Might stitch that on a throw pillow." I pulled the toilet, scraped the wax, disinfected what we'll politely call the scene, and replaced everything from the kit I keep in my truck, because I am always prepared, especially for homes I don't own. My headlamp hummed. My gloves creaked like old knuckles. For the first time, they watched me work, not disappear and return with results they could minimize. They watched me decide what mattered and where it went. Casey FaceTime mid-repair, probably expecting chaos. She got me resealing the base, steady as a surgeon, braid tucked under a cap. Wait, Marin's fixing it? She asked, towel on her head like a crown. Didn't you guys cut her off for quitting college? I held up a peace sign. Hey, Case, how's your crypto king? Still paying rent and attention? She hung up. The silence tasted better than cookies. An hour later, the house was dry. I packed my tools, tied the trash bag, and stood by the door. Don't worry, I said, zipping my jacket. I won't charge you. Dad blinked. You won't? No, I said. But next time there's a travel fee and emotional damages. The sun was low when I stepped outside. My reflection in the storm door looked like a person I might finally like. Tired, competent, unbothered. I drove to the cafe I'd helped remodel, rerouted drains, tamed an espresso leak no one could solve. And the owner, Maria, slid me a latte without asking. On a stool in the corner, I let the cup warm my hands and tried to locate the feeling under my sternum. Why did I go? Why didn't I let them drown in what they made? Because some part of me still wanted to hear, "We're proud of you." Spoiler, they didn't say it when I passed my journeyman exam. They didn't say it when I launched my own business, or when I signed the papers for the little house with the crooked porch and the clean, silent pipes. My phone buzzed a week later. A notification. Casey's throwback. Thursday. Her and Dad at her graduation, captioned Miss Being. With people who value education, heart emoji. The comments performed a standing ovation. My name didn't appear. It was only a slap if I stood still for it. I went back to work. I crawled basements, replaced corroded copper, patched drywall that smelled like old arguments, and kept a stack of handwritten thank you cards in the glove box where some people keep fines. It wasn't glamorous. It was real. Later, a voicemail from Dad. Tired, not angry. We've got another issue with the upstairs bathroom. Pipes, maybe, if you're not too busy. I didn't call back. People who don't apologize hand you a broken sink and hope you'll forget the broken years. Instead, I drove to Home Depot and bought tile for my guest bath. My house deserved the luxury of my attention. So did I. That's the thing about pressure. You can fight it, you can flee it, or you can learn what to do with the wrench when it counts. I chose the wrench and the quiet. Both would be useful sooner than anyone imagined. The week after the flood, the house was dry and my phone was quiet. No text, no thanks, just a digital parade for my sister. Casey posted a throwback Thursday of her and Dad at her graduation. Filter turned all the way up. Caption, Miss Being with people who value education, followed by a heart big enough to float. The comments were a choir. Aunties who hadn't called me in years suddenly remembered how to type, piling on praise and red hearts and quotes about sticking with real degrees. My name never stepped into frame. On second thought, maybe that was the point. I closed the app and crawled under a ranch house to replace a run of copper that looked like a timeline of someone's regrets. The crawl space was cool, quiet. Above me, the homeowner's twins thumped like small elephants as they chased a balloon through the hallway. Down where I was, there was only the lamp glow, the soft rasp of pipe against bracket, and the knowledge that no one could post this moment or take it away from me. When I finished, the mother squeezed my arm and pressed a lavender-scented card into my hand. Thank you for making our house safe for the girls. I tucked it in my glove box with the others. Every few days, I stopped by Maria's cafe, the one whose sinks I replumbed, whose espresso machine I took apart like a puzzle and reassembled until steam behaved like a gentleman. Maria slid a latte across the counter with the unspoken fluency of people who have seen each other working past closing time. How's the quiet palace? She asked, meaning my crooked little house. Less quiet, I said. Cody's learned to warn me about mail carriers. Ah, she grinned. A proper guard. Word drifted around town without me advertising it. The girl with the wrench who shows up on time, cleans up better than she found it, and doesn't charge extra for dignity. I made a logo, M. Ellison Plumbing and Repair. Clean lines, no flourish. The kind of design that would still look honest on a truck at 2 a.m. under a streetlight. In the middle of a Tuesday that longed to be Thursday, I met Luca Hart. He was at the hardware store aisle where buckets go to multiply. He stood there studying sump pumps with the intensity of a man deciphering a language he respects but doesn't speak. Clean hands, calm eyes. A shirt rolled at the sleeves like he'd been invited to lift but hadn't yet been asked. "Looking for horsepower or hope?" I said, nodding toward the pumps. He laughed with his whole face. "Which one keeps a 1920s basement from pretending it's a submarine?" "Both," I said, and reached for a model that won't lie to you when the rain gets personal. We talked filters and French drains and how old houses hide their secrets in the corners. He listened the way you listen to a song you don't want to end. Eyes steady, questions delayed until it made sense to ask them. At checkout, he said, "I owe you a coffee," and when we reached Maria's, she narrowed her eyes like a mother cat assessing a newcomer. Luca passed. Cody leaned into his knee and granted him provisional citizenship. The latte was good. The company stayed. I didn't collect men. I collected quiet square footage and tools. But Luca wasn't a collection. He was a pause I had earned. "Promise me something," he said later, standing in my driveway while Cody debated a moth. "Depends." "Whatever you build," he said, "make sure your name is on the deed, not just the invoice." I was already there, but it felt good to hear it said out loud in clean air. That week, Chuck, a buddy from trade school, called. "You still want in on a flip? Duplex. Good bones, bad plumbing. We could buy, fix, list fast." I pictured the two-door garage, the crawlspace shadows, the wheeze of old vents ready for new lungs. I'm in. We spent weekends like surgeons, one in charge of structure and numbers, one in charge of everything that moves water without complaint. I ran PECs like quiet veins, replaced valves that had lied for 20 years, and learned that if you tune the rhythm of your day to the sound of a new fixture coming alive, you can hear your future answer back. Luca brought sandwiches and didn't try to help when help meant getting in the way. He hauled trash when I nodded. He held a flashlight as if he understood it was a trust fall. He never told me to slow down. He never told me to smile. Sometimes when I was marking cuts on a pipe, I'd feel his eyes on me, curious, not possessive, and realize I wasn't waiting for a compliment to feel complete. I liked him anyway. There was one loose thread. Sabrina Cho, Luca's ex, realtor, hair like a closing argument. She pretended we didn't share a planet until she found out Chuck and I had the duplex under contract. Then she started showing up, just passing by, just checking comps, just making sure we knew what we were doing. "Duplexes can be tricky," she said once, smile buttered and sharp. "Zoning boards love a surprise." "Plumbing boards too," I said, "but only if you pretend code is a suggestion." Her gaze flicked over my boots, my braid, the ring of sweat at my collarbone. "You must be exhausted," she purred. "I sleep like a house with new joists," I said. She laughed, but her eyes measured. "People like Sabrina don't hate you. They audit you. Audit." We finished the duplex ahead of schedule. Rainfall showerheads, vents that sighed like content people, tile lines straight enough to keep your promises on. Chuck staged the rooms with plants that would survive ordinary neglect. On open house day, the light fell clean through the windows, exposing nothing we'd be ashamed to see. My parents arrived halfway through the first hour. They didn't come together. They arrived like two people who share a script but refuse to rehearse. Mom wore the look she puts on for church committees. Dad carried his skepticism like a badge clipped to his belt. For a moment, they didn't recognize me. Hair tidy, shirt clean, clipboard where my wrench had been. Then Mom's face shifted. Surprise first, something more cautious behind it. "Marin," she said, as if the walls might answer. "This is yours?" Chuck stepped up at my shoulder with the timing of a good wingman. "She designed the whole system. Best work I've ever seen. House won't hiccup for 20 years. Dad stared at the manifold like it had personally offended him. "I thought you worked out of a truck." "I do," I said. "Sometimes the truck parks in front of places I own." Silence is a substance. It fills the spaces you've felt empty for too long. Mom's mouth made a small O. Dad processed. I watched understanding take its slow river route across his face, toward an ocean he didn't want to name. Respect. They didn't stay long. They performed interest, nodded at finishes, asked if we'd considered resale value at the very second two bidders were eyeing our sign-in sheet like dessert. When they left, Mom touched my elbow with a strange gentleness. "You look professional," she said. "I am," I said. She opened her mouth as if to say more, then closed it. Sometimes the words you owe someone calcify. You need new ones. After closing, a clean 3-day sprint from listing to offer acceptance, I took my cut, paid my taxes before the ink could think to smudge, and put half down where interest would grow like ivy. The other half I folded back into M. Ellison Plumbing, upgrading the truck. Not flashy. Reliable. The kind of rig that could cross a flooded street and make it look like choreography. The logo looked right on the new door, my name honest against the white. Dad left a voicemail about another leak in the upstairs bath. The message was careful, as if regret were a box he couldn't find the key to. I listened, then set the phone face down on the workbench and measured tile for my own guest bathroom. Boundaries aren't walls, they're framing. They carry the weight you choose not to bear. Luca and I ate dinner on my slanted porch, pizza on paper plates, Cody asleep with his head across both our shoes, like a treaty. "They came to your open house, Disowned," he said. How do you feel?" I peeled cheese with my teeth and looked at the street as if it were a map. Like I'm in the right city, at last. He nodded, then reached into his pocket and placed a small brass key on the table. "I figured you already have 10 of those," he said, "but this one is for my basement door. I patched what I could. If the rain comes like the forecast says, I might need your eyes." "Your eyes were fine," I said, pocketing the key anyway. "Still," he said, smiling, "I'd rather have the girl with the wrench on speed dial." When the first summer storm tested the gutters, I lay awake, counting between lightning and thunder the way you measure grief. Distance, impact, distance again. Somewhere across town, a sump pump failed. Another lived. The world made its choices. Sabrina sent a text at 11:47 p.m. "Congrats on the sale. Word is you underpriced." I replied at morning. "We priced for momentum. It worked." She didn't answer. Luca did. Coffee emoji, then a photo of his basement floor dry as a fact. Days later, a thin envelope slid under my door. An HOA notice about permit filings on a property across the street from my parents' house. Not mine, not yet. But the language hummed with possibility. Structural changes allowed, setbacks reasonable, zoning friendly to duplex conversions if the plan obeyed the lines. I turned the paper over and pictured a porch that didn't lean, a basement that breathed, a kitchen sink that didn't sigh every time the faucet opened. I pictured curtains twitching across from my parents' place, the way curiosity and denial do a dance. I pictured my truck parked at a house they had imagined for someone else. The storm clouds thinned. Sunlight made a pattern on my living room floor that looked like a blueprint. Cody blinked in it, yawned, and went back to sleep. I sharpened a pencil and sketched the future in the margin. Quiet, code, ownership. A street I could rename in my head, Proof Avenue. It started with my mother's voice, trying too hard to sound casual. "We were thinking," she said over the phone, "of helping Casey and her boyfriend get started. You know, maybe the little house across the street from us. It's up for sale. They could fix it up, stay close for a while. Maybe you could, I don't know, lend a hand with renovations?" Her tone was almost sweet, like sugar over steel. I leaned back in my chair, the blueprints for my next project spread across the table. "You want me to help?" "Well," she said, hesitant, "you've got the tools, the experience. We'd cover the purchase, of course. You'd just oversee things." I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then, "You're too late." A pause. "What do you mean?" "I already bought it." The quiet on the line was perfect. Clean, crisp, priceless. "You bought the house across the street?" 2 weeks ago. "Oh," a breath. "I see. I'm turning it into a rental duplex. Haven't decided on tenants yet." "Right," she said, her voice tightening like a pipe under pressure. "Well, congratulations, I suppose." Click, call ended. "No proud of you. No, that's amazing." Just an abrupt hang-up and the sound of years of denial finally breaking a little. I looked at the deed on my table and smiled. For the next few weeks, I kept things quiet. No big trucks, no bright signage, just me, my contractor friend Rich, and the quiet rhythm of restoration. We replaced corroded copper lines with new PEX, re-insulated the crawl space, repaired joists, and sealed every place the house had been bleeding air for decades. Across the street, I could feel their eyes on me. Curtains would twitch. The door would open halfway, then close again. Sometimes I'd see Dad standing in the driveway, pretending to inspect the mailbox. They never came over, but the silence carried the same energy as a scream. Luca stopped by most evenings with food, sometimes Thai, sometimes just a thermos of coffee and a smirk. "You're a dangerous woman," he'd say, watching me measure the new porch beams. "They're watching you rebuild their neighborhood one house at a time." "Good," I said. "Lets them learn what ambition looks like with work boots on." He laughed. "That's my girl." I looked at him then, at the way he said it, gentle, not possessive, like he'd finally understood that loving me meant standing beside the blueprint, not over it. But not everyone took it so gracefully. One afternoon, Sabrina, Luca's ex, appeared at the curb, sunglasses reflecting my scaffold. She looked every inch the realtor, crisp blazer, tablet in hand, smile calibrated for damage. "Heard you bought this property," she said, voice all gloss. "Must be quite the investment, especially given your background." I leaned against the railing. "What background is that?" "You know." She tilted her head. "Hands-on, a bit manual, people talk." I smiled. They always do, especially when they're standing on the wrong side of the deed. Her lips twitched, just slightly. "Careful. Neighborhood politics can be delicate." "Then I'll handle them like plumbing," I said, with precision and patience, and when necessary, pressure. She blinked, taken aback. "Still sharp," she muttered, turning on her heel. "Enjoy your fixer-upper." "Oh, I am," I called after her. "Every single inch of it." A week later, an HOA notice appeared in my mailbox. A polite letter asking about recent structural changes and compliance with community standards. I laughed out loud. Of course she'd run to paperwork. I filled out every form, submitted every permit, and made sure every signature gleamed like a mirror. 2 days later, the approval came through. Stamped, sealed, legal. That evening, a box appeared on my porch. Inside were a new paintbrush, a roll of blue painter's tape, and a note in neat handwriting. "For touch-ups. Thought you might need these. Mom." No apology, no explanation, just tools. I didn't throw them out. I didn't use them either. I set them in the garage, right beside the bag of old plumbing parts from their first flood. Reminders of where this all began. A few streets away, the rain started to fall. Steady at first, then harder. Luca texted, "Storm's rolling in. You good?" I smiled, snapping a photo of the sealed window frames. Dry as a sermon. But across the street, the lights flickered. I saw Dad's flashlight beam darting through the hallway, Mom rushing behind him with a stack of towels. I'd warned them about their old pipes months ago. They hadn't listened. By midnight, thunder cracked over the neighborhood, and a familiar sound echoed faintly across the street. Water, running where it shouldn't. I stood by my window, arms crossed, watching through the blur of rain. Then came the inevitable text. "Dad, Marin, basement flooding again. Toilet backed up. Need help. Urgent." I set my phone down on the counter. Let them wait. Cody barked once, restless, sensing my hesitation. I sighed, grabbed my jacket, and picked up my tool bag. Not because they deserved me, but because I deserved closure. The moment I stepped onto their porch, I could hear it. Water sloshing under the floorboards. The soft panic in my mother's voice. She opened the door, hair undone, face pale. "Oh, thank God. It's worse than last time." Dad stumbled out behind her, socks squishing. "Basement's flooding too. I think it's the pump." "I got it," I said. No greetings, no small talk, just work. I moved through the house like muscle memory, flashlight in hand, mind already tracing the pipes like veins. The culprit was predictable. The same line I'd warned them about had split near the joint, flooding back through the lower bathroom. I didn't say I told you so, I just fixed it. An hour later, I peeled off my gloves, bagged the waste, and stood by the door. "It's handled," I said. Mom looked at me, eyes tired, softer this time. "Would you ever consider coming back for dinner?" I looked down at my boots, clean and dry now, at the faint smell of bleach and rain clinging to the air. "I'll think about it," I said. Then I left. I didn't go to dinner, not out of anger, but out of peace. Instead, I drove to the lake with Cody and a thermos of cheap coffee. The water was calm, dark, endless. He rested his head on my lap, and I watched lightning flicker over the far shore. Everything I had, my house, my business, my name on deeds and trucks and invoices, I built with my own 2 hands. No applause, no inheritance, no permission, just work. The next morning came soft and gray. The storm had wrung the neighborhood out overnight, leaving the pavement dark and shining like wet steel. From my window, I could see Dad dragging soaked towels to the trash. Mom followed with a bucket, her robe clinging to her knees. For once, they didn't glance toward my house. No waves, no pretense, just exhaustion. I sipped my coffee and thought about how water always wins. Not through violence, but persistence. A few days later, an HOA envelope appeared in my mailbox. Thick paper, embossed seal. For a second, I braced for another fine or complaint, maybe for daring to own more than one property on their pristine street. Instead, it was a denial notice. Apparently, my parents had filed a zoning challenge against the duplex conversion, my duplex, citing concerns about neighborhood character. The HOA's response was curt and glorious. All renovations comply with current city code. In fact, the new owner has exceeded standard safety and plumbing requirements. Whoever did the work, hire them again. I laughed until I startled Cody. Then I took a picture of the letter and texted it to Mom. No caption. She didn't reply. But that evening, a car pulled up in front of my driveway. Mom stepped out, holding a Tupperware container and a look that wavered somewhere between guilt and pride. I made baked ziti, she said. You always liked it. I stood on the porch. I did. You're probably too busy to come by. Probably. She nodded, shifting the container between her hands. Your father tried to fix the guest shower again. Brave, I said. Foolish, she answered, almost smiling. The silence between us wasn't angry anymore, just unfinished. I took the ziti. Thanks, Mom. She nodded once and walked back to her car. No apology, no explanations. Just less pretending. That was new. Meanwhile, things on my side of the street were moving fast. Rich had finished the paint and fixtures for the duplex while I was out on a job upstate. By the time I got back, we already had 3 applicants. The second couple, gentle, young, both working full-time, were perfect. She was a nursing student, he was an artist freelancing from home. They looked around the newly finished kitchen, the soft light catching the marble counters I'd installed myself. So you're the property manager? She asked. I smiled. I'm the plumber. Oh, she said, blushing. I mean, cool. You work for the owner? I leaned against the counter. No, I am the owner. Her expression shifted, something between surprise and admiration. That's incredible. Her boyfriend nodded. You built all this yourself? With help, I said. But yeah, most of it. Respect, he said quietly. They signed the lease that night. As they left, I caught my reflection in the glass door. My braid was loose, my hands were rough, my jeans stained with grout. But for the first time, I looked exactly like the person I'd always wanted to become, capable, grounded, and utterly my own. Across the street, things were different. Curtains stayed drawn. The once perfect lawn grew patchy from rain. A for sale sign leaned near the hedge. Pending. Sabrina's car wasn't parked there anymore. Word had it she'd transferred to another real estate office 2 towns over after a few too many zoning misunderstandings. Luca mentioned it casually one night over dinner, like an afterthought. She'll land on her feet, he said. She always does. Good, I said. So will I. He looked at me, smiling. You already did. By the time the holidays crept in, the duplex was fully occupied, the new tenants happy, and my business busier than ever. Then, one evening, as I was locking up my truck, I saw Dad standing by his mailbox. He raised a hand, awkwardly, like a man unsure if he's allowed to wave. I nodded back. He crossed the street halfway, then stopped. I heard you got that rental filled. Yep, I said. Nice couple. Solid people. He nodded, adjusting his jacket. You did good, Marin. The words hung in the cold air, heavy and small. I waited a beat before answering. Thanks, Dad. He nodded again, shoved his hands in his pockets, and walked home. It wasn't much, but it was something. A week later, Rich called from a nearby neighborhood. You want to see something poetic? He said. Always. He texted an address and a photo, a corner house with a for sale sign. The sellers? He said. Family across the street from one of your rentals, pipe shot, debt piling, looking to downsize. I stared at the photo. I think I know that house. You interested? Very. When the deal closed, I stood in the empty living room and listened to the faint hum of new pipes through the walls. No applause, no crowd, just the steady whisper of water flowing exactly where it was meant to go. Across town, my parents were moving into a smaller condo. I didn't go to help. I didn't need to. I'd already built my piece, one wrench turn at a time. Later that month, Casey posted a photo online. The whole family crammed into the dim living room of their new condo. No smiles, just a caption. Holidays are better when you're close. I didn't comment. I just closed the app, poured myself some tea, and looked out at the street. My tenants' porch lights glowed steady across the way. My houses, my work, standing quiet, whole, alive. And for once, there was nothing left to fix. It's strange what silence sounds like when you've earned it. Not the cold kind, not the sort that follows slammed doors or arguments over who's right. This was different. It was peace. On early mornings, I'd walk Cody down the same street where I'd once been dismissed as the dropout plumber. Now, the air smelled of wet concrete and new paint. Mine. The duplex windows glowed faintly before dawn, and if you listened closely, you could hear it. The soft hum of water flowing clean through new pipes. Steady, constant, unbothered. My own kind of hymn. Across the street, my parents' old house sat quiet. The new owners, a young family, waved when they saw me. They'd called once to ask who handled my plumbing. I do, I'd said. They smiled. Then we're in good hands. The next week, an envelope arrived. No return address, just my name written in careful script. Inside was a folded note and a check. The note read, "For what we owe you, for more than we'll ever say out loud." It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was my mother's. I sat at the table, staring at it, until the sunlight reached the edge of the paper. Then I smiled, tore the check neatly in half, and dropped it in the trash. Some debts are meant to stay paid in silence. Business was steady. Word of mouth had spread. I started hiring 2 apprentices, both women, both as stubborn as I was at their age. One of them asked me once, "Doesn't it bother you, fixing things other people broke?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "It's the only work that guarantees progress." Luca grinned when I told him that. He'd been by my side through most of it now. Steady, patient, the kind of man who didn't try to compete with what he admired. We shared coffee most mornings, sometimes silence, sometimes plans. He'd tease me about my growing fleet of properties. "You're taking over the whole zip code," he'd joke. I'd shrug. Someone's got to make sure the plumbing's done right. Sometimes I caught him staring at me with that look again. The one that saw not the calluses, not the sweat, but the woman who had built an empire from the ground up and never asked for permission. I didn't say it, but I knew. He was proud. Then one afternoon, while I was wrapping up a job at the far end of town, my phone buzzed. Dad. For a moment, I almost didn't answer, but curiosity, and maybe a little softness, won. "Hey," he said, voice low. "We've got an issue again. Downstairs toilet's out. Think you can take a look?" I exhaled slowly, leaning against my truck. "Sure," I said. "My hourly rate's $180 now, up front." There was a pause, then, surprisingly, a laugh. Small, honest. "Fair enough," he said. "We'll call someone else this time." "Good idea." We hung up. No bitterness, no lingering tension. Just an understanding that I'd finally set the price for all the years they'd undervalued me. A few weeks later, I got a call from a real estate agent I'd worked with before. "There's a property 3 blocks from your duplex," he said. "Nice corner lot, fully gutted. Family's moving out. Needs everything." I didn't even ask for photos. "I'll take it," I said. He chuckled. "Didn't even tell you the price." I already know it's worth it. And it was. When the paperwork cleared, I stood alone in the empty living room. Just me, my boots on dusty floorboards, the echo of potential in every wall. This was house number 3. 3 homes in the same neighborhood where I'd once been told I'd never amount to anything. Now, every fixture, every pipe, every switch hummed because I had touched it. Every time someone flushed, washed, or showered, it was my name, silent but present, running through the veins of this place. Weeks later, Casey posted another photo online. All of them, Mom, Dad, Casey, her boyfriend, crammed into their new condo. The light was dim, their smiles strained. Caption: "Holidays are better when you're close." I didn't comment. I just took another bite of pumpkin pie, turned up the jazz, and looked out my window. The duplex glowed warm across the street. Rain started softly against the glass, but inside, everything was quiet. Cody lifted his head, yawned, and rested it on my leg. I leaned back, letting the sound of steady water run somewhere in the distance. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need anyone to say, "We're proud of you." The proof was everywhere, humming through copper lines, sealed beneath tile, echoing through every home I'd built. I'd become the foundation they never believed I could be. And that was enough.